What's up, everyone? It's Deltlead, and today I'm going to be covering what my predictions are for the 1.0 release of SimpleRockets 2. Now, this is a video that you guys have been requesting for a long time now, and I wanted to make this and put this together to kind of lay out what I think is going to be in the game based on what the devs have posted in the dev blogs, in the suggested features on the SimpleRockets 2 website, and what people have been saying in the community, and also some more of my specific speculation on future updates and what I think the trajectory of the game is going to be. So first, starting off with what we absolutely know is going to be in the game. The first thing that we absolutely know is going to be in the game is campaign mode. That has been pretty much explicitly confirmed by Pedro and Andrew Garrison on the major devs of the game. And from what we know so far, in the 0.9.900 update of the game, there was a leak that basically discussed kind of some of the vision for the game, but what it really released, or what it really talked about, that I think is more important, is they talked about the tech tree here. Well, they didn't talk about the tech tree, but they showed it off. This is clearly the tech tree of the game, and we can tell just by looking at this. We have branching tech tree in the campaign mode, a lot like Kerbal Space Program with their research system. So that tells us that there is going to be some sort of progression system with campaign mode. You're not going to have all the parts unlocked at the beginning. You're going to have to unlock them somehow. Now, we don't know if that's going to be through collecting some system of research points, like Kerbal Space Program currently has, or if you have to use money that you accrue during the game, or if there's certain milestones that unlock them. Based on, and this is kind of moving to the speculation portion, based on the fact that this is a branching tech tree and not just a linear one, I would say it's not going to be milestones. There's going to be some sort of user choice where they have a resource to spend that unlocks certain tech nodes, and each tech node is going to have a different price, and they're going to get more expensive as you unlock them. That's a very, very standard way of doing research tech trees in video games. So what else do I think we're going to see in the game? Well, it's kind of hard to tell beyond that. So this is where we're moving from just what they've said and more into what I think is going to be in the game. So besides the tech tree, what we know is going to be in the game is money. The parts in-game already have price tags on them, so we know engines cost a certain amount, and changing their features makes them more or less expensive. Fuel has a cost per kilogram. All these things cost money, so there's going to be money in the game. Really wouldn't make sense as a campaign mode without some sort of money and resource to manage. But how that's going to look, we don't. I think it's going to be pretty similar to Kerbal Space Program. And I say that because Kerbal Space Program and SimpleRockets 2 are the same genre of game. They're going to be similar because they're the same genre. They're trying to do basically the same thing. It's the same reason that Call of Duty and any other first-person shooter you can point to kind of look the same. You've got the basic mechanics there because they're in the same genre. How I think SimpleRockets 2 is going to be different from Kerbal Space Program, I think it's going to be, going to be a lot larger emphasis on the realism aspect of SimpleRockets 2. You see that in the procedural parts system. You have a lot of control over different engineering parameters in the rockets, and the pricing for these things is more realistic. In Kerbal Space Program, things cost hundreds of whatever their Kerbal currency is in game, whereas SimpleRockets 2, things are on the scale of thousands, tens of thousands, millions of dollars, much more like real rockets would be. As far as how that price system is going to work out, they have done a lot to make that a little bit more accurate. I've noticed in the 0.9.900 update, they've balanced the prices for parts, which the money system still doesn't have any actual practical application, aside from you get to see the number and see how much it costs. But we actually do, I do think that the new update makes that a more realistic system. The other thing I think we're going to see is some sort of part system that will have to do with research in some way, and if not directly with the research tech tree, then maybe it'll be affiliated with missions and stuff, to where you take a contract and you have to put certain parts on your rocket or on your satellite or whatever to accomplish that contract. I think we're going to see things like temperature sensors, pressure sensors, electromagnetic sensors, accelerometers, infrared imagers, all sorts of different research and technology items, systems that you can add to a craft that may or may not be procedural. That I don't know. I could see it being a procedural system the same way that in the last update, all the other parts like rotators, hinges, electric motors, parachutes, lights, all those things are now procedural. You can change their size, you can adjust their like performance and stuff. I think we could see a similar thing like that. For instance, the camera part, it used to be that you could make the camera field of view however big or small you wanted, and then they added a variable zoom option, and now what they've done is the size of the camera dictates the maximum zoom capability of that camera. So if you have a very large camera, you can get a very narrow field of view. You can get a very narrow zoom. But small cameras have relatively wide uh, fields of view, relatively low zoom capabilities, which kind of makes sense. You know, a small, cheap camera is not going to be able to look very far. I think we're going to see something very similar with whatever new system of parts they add to the game. For instance, if they did research parts, bigger parts are going to be more expensive and heavier, but they're also going to be more capable and give you more whatever unit, whatever like system they have for value for those things. If they do something similar to Kerbal Space Program where it's research points, they'll give you more research points. If it's something else, maybe like the value of the contract or whatever, they'll give you more money for the contract. I don't know. That's moving away from what I can say definitively, but I definitely think procedural parts are going to be a big thing. I also think they're going to be putting some new mechanics into the game. One thing that they've definitely kind of moved towards, especially with the Brittle Rockets update that they had posted in 0.9.900, is the ability for heat damage from engines, as well as like a more accurate way of measuring heat damage in general, which I definitely think that is moving towards a proper heat management mechanic in SimpleRockets too. So not only do you have heat from reentry, heat from the sun, um, and heat from engines being a factor, I absolutely think they're going to have some way of getting rid of waste heat and maybe other parts that generate heat and warm up, heat the craft in other ways. It wouldn't surprise me if the command chip started generating its own heat over time, and if you didn't have a way of getting rid of that heat, it would overheat and break. I could totally see things like electric motors, any other like electric part that moves generating heat. Cameras could generate heat. There's a huge, huge way that they could build this out as a mechanic of the game. I absolutely see that being a thing. Now, moving on to some of the additional features in the game, if we go over to now, moving over to some additional features that we might be able to see in the game, moving over to the roadmap. So here's all of the features that have been completed and are in the most recent update. All these things we've seen, you can take a look at them. You can read the dev notes yourself. I'm not going to talk about them. There is a lot. Most of them are bug fixes. Some small features and stuff have been added as well, but there's been a lot. Now, in the actual, what they call the research and development stage, basically meaning confirmed we're working on this, confirmed it's going to be in a future update. Maybe not the next update, but a future update for sure. Career mode, right there, with the most votes of anything in the game right there. Also, things that are confirmed is the community translation tools. This is a little less relevant to the game specifically. Community translation tools just meaning the ability for people to translate the game into their own language. Right now, it's in English and a couple other primary Western languages. I don't know all the languages that SimpleRocket 2 is available in. If it's available in your language, congrats. If not, hopefully in the new update, you will be able to translate it to your own language as part of the community itself, instead of just having devs do it, which is super awesome. Beyond that, though, this next section is prospects. So these are all ideas that have been voted on by the community. The highest voted ones make it up to the top and become a more like high priority thing to look at for the devs. So the first thing we see here, and this is a very popular thing, is adding a fuselage slice ability. So what that means, and this is, you can write a description for these things and they can be long or short. They just said cut function. So what I'll do is I'll explain this since they didn't explain it in their post. Slicing or cutting or construing in a CAD environment, a 3D computer-assisted drawing environment, basically means, like, let's say you have a cylinder, and you take a smaller cylinder and you put it inside that cylinder, and then you cut the smaller cylinder from the larger one. Now you have a cylinder with a hole in it. You basically made a pipe. So computer-assisted drawing for engineers, that's used a lot to create complex geometries by taking a bunch of simple geometries, adding them together, and then cutting them apart basically to make these complex geometries out of simple geometries. And then the final product is one part that has all these different shapes, holes, corners, whatever it might be for that part, whatever you're trying to design. Uh, Very, very popular thing. A lot of people wanted to see this. Not at all surprised to see that as number one. And the number two is truly spherical tanks. So be able to make, like right now in the game, you can make cylinders and any flat-sided shape, cubes pretty easily, pyramids, triangles pretty easily, any of those shapes. But you're not able to make spherical shapes. And so that's another huge thing. Absolutely, I believe we're going to see that in the 1.0 update. After that, we're dropping off of the game mechanics aspect and more into quality of life stuff. So these next three posts, well, let me rephrase that. The subfolders and the favorites are quality of life. I'll talk about ability to select the different nodes because that's actually very important, especially to me. So the ascending and descending nodes are where your craft crosses the orbital plane of whatever body you're looking at, right? So your inclination, if this is the orbital plane, the equator, your inclination is the angle between your orbit and the equator, or whatever reference plane you have. And then the nodes, the ascending and descending nodes, are the points where your orbit hits the reference point right there. And whenever you're trying to do like an inclination change to maybe match your craft's orbit with another body that you're trying to travel to or another craft that you're trying to rendezvous, which are very, very important maneuvers, you have to put the node on that ascending or descending node. And that's not really intuitive right now. You have to like mouse over your orbit and find where the arrow's pointing that shows you the node, and then try to click on it. Being able to actually like select and lock on different nodes in your orbit would be so amazing. It would be so easy to just like, okay, I want to burn at ascending node, click ascending node, boom, it's right on the ascending node. And that goes for periapsis and apoapsis as well. A lot of burns you want to do them at your highest and lowest points in your orbit. So that's a huge thing. Absolutely think we'll see that in the 1.0 update. That's a pretty big quality of life update. Fairly simple, fairly simple from my point of view. Thing to add to the game. It doesn't build out any new mechanics. It's just a nice addition to an existing system. Beyond that, we have subfolders. So being able to categorize your crafts and stuff into different folders. Pedro actually suggested this one 3.4 years ago, which is a long time ago. But yeah, being able to use subfolders for parts. So if you go to like the parts list, it just shows you a list of parts. But what if you could build a folder for the first stage, put all of the first stage parts in the first stage, and then you could hide it. So if you're looking at the first stage, you could look at the first stage parts, or you could hide all those parts really easily. How awesome would that be? Or if you're doing like maybe a robot arm, and you want all the parts on the robot arm to be in a subfolder, and then subfolders within that for each different component. Again, a lot of different ways you can take that. That would be an awesome thing. And especially since a dev suggested it and got it voted up to here, absolutely think that's going to be a thing in the game. Also, favorites, being able to favorite your crafts or favorite crafts on the site. That would be really cool. If you've got, you've been playing the game for a while and you've got like 100 different crafts you've built, but you want to reuse, you really only want to reuse like 5 or 6 of them, having a favorites list would be really nice to add to the game. These are all things that I think would be definitely we would see in the 1.0 update. Beyond that, the rest of these suggestions or bug fixes, like I'm not going to talk about the bug fixes because they're obviously going to be fixing bugs. The rest of these feature suggestions, not really. I don't see these being in 1.0 update. They could be in future updates and beyond for sure, don't get me wrong, but I just don't see them being in the 1.0 update. Now, moving on to stuff that I think will maybe be in future versions of the game, but not the 1.0 update. The biggest thing that I absolutely see being a feature in the game is communications as a mechanic in the game. So spacecraft, a large function that spacecraft a large function that spacecraft serve is telecommunications. Telecommunications satellites are by far the most common type of satellite that you're going to see in space. Period. GPS satellites are basically just telecommunications satellites, and they use some fancy triangulation techniques. TV satellites, obviously telecommunications satellites. The whole Starlink constellation, all of those are telecommunications satellites. Even satellites that aren't necessarily telecommunications satellite, that's not the primary purpose of that satellite. They still have telecommunications equipment on them. They've got radios, they've got receivers. They have to, because you have to be able to send and receive signals from spacecraft to be able to operate them, to be able to monitor them. So the fact that the game doesn't have those right now is kind of disappointing, because that's a huge factor in spaceflight. I absolutely think they're going to be adding this to the game. In the interview I did with Pedro a couple of months ago, we talked about this being a feature, and I asked him, what would be one thing if you could just snap your fingers and it would be in the game? What would you choose? And what he said was communication stuff. So radios, satellite dishes, being able to only control a craft when it's within communications range and line of sight of another, either communication satellite or the Space Center specifically. Having to build constellations of satellites to be able to actually control your rockets in orbit. That would be a really interesting and challenging addition to the game that would make a lot of what would otherwise be relatively simple missions a lot harder and a lot more intentional. You would have to really plan missions out, or you would have to lay the groundwork and build out an infrastructure to be able to carry on future missions that are farther away. Absolutely, absolutely. I believe that they'll add that feature, add that mechanic to the game at some point. Will they add it in the 1.0 update? I doubt it. It will come. I would almost say, mark my words, it's going to come. But it's not going to be in the 1.0 update. I would be shocked if they added that in the 1.0 release. I see this being like a 1.1 or 1.2 release feature to the game. Anyway, guys, what do you think about this? Are there things that you think maybe I missed that you would think would be in the 1.0 update? If there are different features or things that you think I missed, go ahead and put a comment in this video. Write out. Let me know what you think that I missed. Or maybe if I said something that you think won't be there, let me know. Put it in the comments. I love getting your feedback. I love reading your comments. Absolutely appreciate it, guys. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like and subscribe. When you like and subscribe and you comment on these videos, it helps YouTube know that they're content that people want to see, and it puts it out in front of more people, gets this channel more views, and it makes it easier for me to make more content for you guys. If you would like to talk to me directly and give me feedback on videos, you can join the ISS Discord channel. There's a link in the description below in this video if you'd like to join that. Until next time, guys, take care, keep on building.